Hello, my friend. It's Gina. Thank you for continuing the long journey in the effort to find justice for Elizabeth. This is an account that's based on a sad but true story, one that, as of this recording, remains ongoing. Welcome back to Lost Sister, a Discarded Woman, Episode 5. Content warning. This and future episodes contain sensitive topics and may cause distress to some listeners. Hearing disturbing actions of oppression, manipulation, and abuse can bring up painful memories, personal struggles, and trauma for many. Narrator's note: the names have been changed and places are purposefully arbitrary to protect the privacy of those involved. This podcast is our way of telling Catherine and Elizabeth's story so that others can be aware of potential future issues. The central figures in this story include Catherine, her sister Elizabeth, Elizabeth's husband Walter, and Walter's granddaughter Darcy. A short recap. Elizabeth, a retired doctor with dementia, and her husband Walter, a stroke survivor, were missing before Elizabeth's younger sister Catherine found them. Finally, months later, Walter's granddaughter Darcy had moved Elizabeth and Walter without a word to Elizabeth's family. At this point in our story, Walter is dead. Elizabeth is in an assisted living facility, and Darcy has managed to be named Elizabeth's guardian again, and then cruelly banned Elizabeth's family from visiting their sister. In episode 4, we delved into some of Elizabeth's past, her education background, how she and Walter met, along with some of the domestic abuse that she dealt with throughout her marriage. The most pressing information we learn is within the detective's reporting, including the date when Walter's will was changed, details of the probate of Walter's estate. A reminder, his will left everything to Darcy. The statement made by Darcy admitting both Elizabeth and Walter were incapable of making decisions. Even the facts surrounding Darcy's new home purchase, for over $750,000 paid in cash, Darcy's divorce, and money, lots of money, being moved by someone. Now that we've refreshed our memories, let's continue with our story. Oh yes, the family is not about to abandon their sister. Even with the latest disaster of Darcy being renamed as guardian, they are even more determined. Catherine and the brothers sat down with their attorney, and they all agreed that there is no other alternative but to go back to family court. They will argue on Elizabeth's behalf that if Darcy is the beneficiary of Walter's will, which is all of the couple's resources and assets at this point, then legally she cannot also be the guardian. We discussed before that one entity cannot be both heir and guardian. It's a blatant conflict of interest to any layperson, let alone to any law professional. If the facts are heard, the truth will out. I'd like to note that the family's attorney had originally stated they could only handle the guardianship. Then things changed. After learning more and more about the circumstances that led the family to this point, the attorney is much more motivated to see justice for Elizabeth. Hours of research into precedents, judicial rulings, how to find where this case in particular fits into a broad legal framework, then crafting the arguments that could carry the most weight with the latest judge, and finding a way to present as quickly, clearly, and concisely as possible. When appearing in court, An attorney has no idea when a question from the judge or an objection from the other side of the aisle might be raised, or any number of other events that could halt, postpone, or even derail their case. This attorney, I'll call them Alex, has already shown a level of compassion and honest respect for the law that is encouraging, to say the least. Although generally optimistic, Alex is genuinely concerned about the future of the case and very open with the family about the pitfalls that could happen as they move forward. Alex is devoted to this case, to the point of saying that Darcy needs to be held accountable for what she's done to Elizabeth. Bravo, Alex, bravo. The family court hearing is about a week away, and Catherine receives a phone call. Caller ID indicates that it's Darcy. Of course, she's wary of answering. So far, Darcy has only been adversarial. But Darcy is Elizabeth's guardian, the only person the facility could contact in case of any issue with Elizabeth, large or small. And if Darcy is calling Catherine about Elizabeth, most certainly she makes the quick decision to answer. Now, please note, my friend, I am doing us all a favor and not reciting the entire call. It would be tedious and exhausting. And I want to be very clear, this recounting is factual, but edited. Not only was Darcy scattered, and I use that term loosely, but I lost count of how many times the words I and me were used. And there's only so many times anybody wants to hear, but I love my grandmother, and I only want to do what was asked of me, and but it's what he wanted, before you would hit the stop button. And I wouldn't blame you one little bit. The call lasted an hour and 3 minutes. Out of that time, Catherine spoke for 6 minutes and 30 seconds, including several times that Darcy talked over her. The remaining 56 minutes and 30 seconds was Darcy. Not once did she ask, Catherine, are you still there? Did we get disconnected? You know, the natural response when there's no sound from the other person. We all know that sound, right? It's dead air, which either means the other person has me on mute, on purpose or by accident, or you lost the connection. Either way, the caller would elicit a response, normally. But this wasn't a normal call. Now, the call started rather benign. Darcy introduced herself, saying, we haven't even met. I don't know you, you don't know me. Maybe we should meet for coffee for half an hour and just talk, because I want to tell you about my grandparents. After listening to Darcy's ramblings, Catherine attempted to speak. It seems that your perception of Elizabeth's family is that we're only interested in Elizabeth's money, which is far from the truth. Elizabeth is my sister, but she has also been my best friend my entire life. And Walter, he kept us apart too many times. The only thing our family wants is for Elizabeth to be taken care of, what's best for her health, her well-being, and to have her family around her. She worked hard her whole life and should be in a facility that can give her the kind of care she needs and deserves. Darcy snapped back. Do you think my grandfather didn't work? You don't know about them, and I do. I visited them every year. Maybe they had a rough marriage, but if you knew she felt abused, you could have reported it. Told somebody if you felt that way. She was a grown woman. She was a doctor. She could have walked away at any time. Do you think she deserves a certain dollar amount just because she stayed in an abusive marriage and didn't have the choice to get out? You think she'll get some kind of money that will help mend that? Sorry, not sorry. Sidebar. Excuse me? Did she actually just ask how much money Elizabeth should get for living in an abusive marriage? And then had the audacity to follow that up with, you think she'll get some kind of money to mend that? What the actual hell? How dare she? How much money does Elizabeth deserve? All of it, damn it. All of it. Catherine told her, I can see you honestly don't understand what Elizabeth's life was like. One time, Walter drove her car into a swimming pool because he was angry with her. Another time, after our father's funeral, Elizabeth went back to find that Walter had taken a hatchet to the cherished executive desk our dad handmade for Elizabeth. It was a gift when she graduated med school. That's what her life was like. What Walter was like. Darcy wanted to know, how do you know that? Catherine told her, because I saw it. Much of the call was devoted specifically to Darcy. How much she loves her grandparents. What a toll the entire ordeal has created in her life. That she has had to endure making arrangements, dealing with their health issues and medications, making sure they were fed ever since she moved them here, that she had already put $250,000 into the Guardian account just for Elizabeth's care. How she had had to deal with all of this while also getting a divorce, raising young children, working part-time. It has become very clear what Darcy has no clue who he really was. It has become very clear that Darcy had no clue of who Walter really was. She desperately wants to believe he had made a great deal of money, when we know for a fact that Elizabeth was the sole breadwinner. In fact, there was not enough work history in Walter's lifetime for him to be eligible for Medicare when he turned 65. And yet, in her eyes, he managed to use all the money he'd made to keep his doctor wife in a fantastical lifestyle she believed they had lived. Even went so far to say, and I quote, "My grandfather was extremely intelligent. He could almost do surgeries." The points Darcy obviously wanted to drive home throughout this phone call are reflected in these statements. I want you to trust what they both ask of me. I'm asking you to trust me that the money is there, it's never been missed, and she'll be taken care of. I mean, there's over $300,000 in an account just for her. I've already paid over $500,000 in taxes and legal fees. The longer we take to decide all of this mess, the more expensive it gets for all of us. I don't like hearing that you want to take guardianship and challenge legally financial stuff. I don't want to go to trial over this, but my next step is to hire a criminal attorney. That money is committed, and I will still be paying for her care. We can walk away from this. We can come to an agreement, and this stuff can end. I'll demonstrate financially that I will provide for her until she passes. I'm asking you to leave me the guardian, trust that I'm putting money in an account for her, and I'm making you beneficiary on anything that's remaining. I just don't want to do any more of this litigation. It's foolish. I will pay all of your attorney fees. I'll secure an amount that covers her medical care. You don't have to fear I'm not going to pay for her care. You have my promise. We can come to an agreement. We can do that for her. I just think we can come to an agreement. Oh, so many takeaways. Trust me, planning to cover all of them in future episodes. But here's a few questions I have for now. Maybe you have the same ones. Darcy has repeatedly stated that she has been overwhelmed with caring for Walter and or Elizabeth on top of her own life. Of course that's difficult. Many of us have been in similar situations. So why is she fighting so hard to remain the guardian? Why not hand over those responsibilities to Elizabeth's other family members? Darcy would then be free to live her own life and just enjoy visiting Elizabeth as she wanted. Personally, I would grab that offer in a heartbeat, as long as I was assured that Elizabeth is well and truly cared for in a manner that she deserves and needs. Darcy also stated repeatedly that she loved Elizabeth so much, but actions speak, don't they? Elizabeth was alone in a small room in a facility for months throughout the holidays. Rare visits from Darcy, but nothing else. No family contact, no stimulation, not even all of her medications. The only furnishings in her bleak little room was a metal cot, a child-sized dresser, and somebody else's clothes. Two things are evident to me. Darcy seems most concerned about Darcy, and the other is the allure of money. Are you also wondering what Darcy meant by making Catherine the beneficiary on whatever is remaining in Elizabeth's guardian account? Me too. And did you catch that at first she says she put in $250,000 into the guardian account, and then magically through the conversation it increased to $300,000? Come on, you gotta wonder. Doesn't it sound suspiciously like a bribe? Yeah, gotta wonder. Another of my questions is, what if there wasn't any money involved? Do you really think Darcy wouldn't have contacted Catherine or practically anybody else and said, "Come get your sister"? Worth a thought. Oh, and the "my next step is to hire a criminal attorney" bit. Criminal attorneys are the ones you hire if or when you need to be defended against criminal charges brought against yourself. Maybe she was just confused, misinformed, or something. Now, I think we've all recognized who Darcy is, but it keeps getting even more clear the more we learn as this story unfolds. And with the hearing just days away, this conversation sure seems like she's nervous, overcompensating, grasping at straws, testing the water, maybe just desperate. So now, as promised, we're going to delve into the court hearing that the family, especially Catherine and their attorney Alex, have been anxiously preparing for. I was kind of anxious as well, partly because I went to the hearing that day. I wanted to be able to paint the picture from my own perspective. It's family court. The judge announces the first case. They then ask everyone who isn't involved in that particular case to leave the courtroom until their case is called. After that, there's only a few people left inside the courtroom. This court allows parties who cannot attend in person to appear via a video feed. I'll also say the proceedings are filmed for the court record. The judge has a microphone for the recording, but the attorneys and anyone giving testimony do not, and they face the judge, their backs to the gallery. So hearing what is said inside the courtroom can be quite challenging. People moving around, whispers, lots of wrestling papers. It is definitely not like watching Law and Order. The judge made it apparent from the start that he has taken the time to read the entire case file, which by now, seriously, is about a foot thick. This judge meant business. He began by stating that there was clearly an inherent conflict of interest, that Darcy cannot be both the beneficiary of Walter's will and Elizabeth's guardian. The judge stated conflict by judicial admission. Sidebar: a judicial admission is a formal stipulation that concedes any element of claim or defense. Its effect is to determine the issue conclusively, to dispense entirely with the need for further evidence. Even with that said, Darcy's attorney made an attempt to argue that it may not be in the best interest of the ward as it's a waste of time and resources. It sure seems apparent that they are so adamant. Just because this old lady can't use money on a daily basis herself, she doesn't have a job or a home or can't even go shopping, so because she's old and has dementia, that she's not worthy of being permitted to have all of her own assets used for her own care. But it's okay for a younger person to have full access to that money and just dispense it out as necessary. Maybe because I'm closer to Elizabeth's age and have the knowledge that I could be in the same boat, well, as could any of us really. The fact that folks with diminished capacity do need someone else to make decisions doesn't escape me, but it's the ease of dismissal that still makes my blood boil. Elizabeth's physical health is great. She could live a very long time, and memory care facilities are extremely expensive, folks, and those costs will only increase as the years go by. She could very well use every penny of her assets. I want to bring up a point that's been nagging me for quite some time. At one of the other earlier hearings, where they managed to kick the can down the road, one of Darcy's attorneys made a point of asking the court to not go against the will, renouncing the will wouldn't help Elizabeth. Quote, "How does half of the personal property and half of the estate help Elizabeth at all?" On this day, Darcy's attorney also argued that just because Darcy is the beneficiary of Walter's will, well, that wouldn't affect her guardianship of Elizabeth, even though Darcy herself, as well as her own attorneys, have openly admitted in court to the conflict of interest. That is inherent. The judge stated in a "don't make me repeat myself" tone, "I am permanently removing Darcy as guardian." Honestly, Darcy should have never been appointed guardian in the first place, even though Darcy had knowledge and contact information for Catherine. Now, whether that original judge even asked if there were other family members, we just don't know. But if it was asked, and Darcy and or her attorney stated that there were no other interested parties, well, that's on them. Of course, I have no evidence of any of that, only observations, speculations, and questions. Always lots of questions. Darcy's attorney also continued to argue that the judge could separate the guardianship role from the conservator's role, and then appoint guardian to Darcy and another entity as conservator, like a banking institution. At that point, Darcy spoke up and did the same sort of rambling diatribe she did with Catherine a few days earlier. You know, the "I just want to do what was asked of me" story. The judge allowed it for almost 5 minutes. To be honest with you, the family who were in attendance weren't happy that she was even allowed to talk. From where I sat, I was surprised too that the judge permitted it at all. But in hindsight, I think that judge may have been allowing her to say just enough for the record that if she were to complain down the road that she hadn't been heard, well, now she's been heard. Before heading into court, most attorneys coach their clients to only speak if the judge asks a direct question to them. Otherwise, that's what we pay attorneys for, to speak for you. When she stopped talking, the judge made the statement once again, I am permanently removing Darcy as guardian and conservator. Don't think he could have been any more apparent. And I got the feeling that he recognized Darcy's overall intent as well. Since the judge had read the entire file, he said there are filings indicating that several $1 million had been transferred from Elizabeth's account and then into Walter's account. There were questions regarding how much in each account, and more specifically, that there are medical records that prove Elizabeth had been suffering from severe dementia before the transfer of those funds, and that these several $1 million was not shown in the inventory filed. The judge ordered Darcy to make a full accounting of all transactions as conservator and present it to the court within 20 days. Sidebar: Darcy never supplied the full accounting. At one point, a single page from a bank statement was provided, which is by no means a full accounting. The accounting issue has not been brought up in court again as of the day of this recording. Now, it wasn't all roses and wine for the family that day. Bank records from the short time Catherine had been appointed guardian had been requested. You might remember how the bank had deflected for weeks before finally rejecting the request without the family acquiring a subpoena. Then, Darcy regained guardianship, so she dodged that bullet. And at this hearing, the request had been made by Elizabeth's siblings, as they are only interested parties, but not the guardian, who is the only one who can request that information. The judge squashed the request. As far as naming a new guardian, the judge asked for suggestions from both attorneys. Alex suggested Catherine. She had been named the guardian before, was willing to take on the obligation, had been a social worker, and was well versed with hospitals and assisted living facilities. Of course, Darcy's attorney objected, stating that, well, Catherine lives in another state. She might decide to move Elizabeth out of state with her, which would mean Darcy could lose access to her grandmother. The judge also asked for the guardian ad litem's opinion, who responded that most of the time it would be a family member, if there is any family, who would take on that responsibility. The judge then asked, well, who do you think Elizabeth would choose? The guardian ad litem responded that Elizabeth is incapable of making that kind of decision, Judge. The judge said, there are other siblings. Wasn't there at least one who lived locally? Alex said, yes, Judge. One of Elizabeth's brothers, Charles, who is here today, lives in the vicinity. The judge asked Charles if he was willing to take on the role of guardian, and Charles accepted. Finally, once again, Elizabeth's family is in charge. Catherine and the family can rest a little easier, at least for now. Join us soon for Episode 6, Lost Sister, A Discarded Woman, where we learn more of what transpired during the time Darcy had guardianship and the next steps the family must take to find justice for Elizabeth. Abuse in all forms is an equal opportunity instrument of control, regardless of age, gender, IQ, education, or socioeconomic status. Whatever your age, for your own sake and those who care about you, please establish a living will. Keep it somewhere your chosen caretakers can access it. And if you don't have your assets in order, make plans right now to do so. Talk to an attorney and/or an investment institution you trust and make it happen. The terms elder abuse, elder neglect, and elder fraud are relatively new. In general, elder abuse is a term referring to any knowing, intentional, or neglectful act by a caregiver or any other person that causes harm or a serious risk of harm to a vulnerable elderly person. Legislators in all 50 states have passed some form of elder abuse prevention laws. A good place to start for more information is the website justice.gov/elderjustice. And if you suspect elder abuse, there is help. The National Elder Fraud Hotline is 1-833-FRAUD-11. That's 833-372-8311. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 800-799-7233. Links and phone numbers are also located on the Lost Sister webpage, which is at lostsister.buzzsprout.com. I hope you continue following as Elizabeth's family continue the struggles to help her in Lost Sister, a Discarded Woman. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, and share with your family and friends. Our hope is to share Elizabeth and Catherine's story so that it might help others to avoid the same happening to them or someone they love. Thank you.